I grew up in the 2010s, and despite living in Michigan, my family would often travel to Florida to visit Walt Disney World about once a year, a tradition we continue to this day, more or less. And growing up on Disney meant that my first ever roller coaster was Space Mountain, my first ever upside down ride was Rock and Roller Coaster, and my first ever drop ride was the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. But when the pandemic hit, we didn't get to go that summer like we normally did. We ended up going in November, but during that time away I began researching other parks. That's when I asked my dad if we could go to Universal. My first trip to Universal was in May of 2021, 2 months before I actually started this channel, and I fell in love. When all your life the scariest ride you know is Tower of Terror, and then all of a sudden you stand before the Velocicoaster, the Rip Ride Rocket, the Incredible Hulk, it's like a whole new world. And that's the story of how I became a Universal person in a house of Disney people. Although I still do enjoy Disney, by the way. But the thing Universal had that I've searched for as I've gotten older is thrills. While I haven't unfortunately experienced Universal beyond City Walk since 2021, I hope to return next year and experience the existing parks along with Epic Universe. Now, how does this tie into Cedar Point? Well, as I've gotten older and more willing to ride more intimidating attractions, I inevitably stumbled upon Cedar Point. And wouldn't you know it, America's roller coaster is only 2 hours away from me. So one day during the winter of 2022, my family was in Sandusky for a weekend at Great Wolf Lodge, and I asked my mom if we could drive up to Cedar Point, despite it being closed. And that was the first time I ever got to experience the legendary drive across the causeway, and got to see firsthand the absolute insanity that lied beyond the front gate. Fast forward to 2023, me, my family, some family friends, and Nate from the channel, Amazing Nate, took the day off school and visited Cedar Point for the day. And to me, everything about the park was immaculate. I will always glaze the drive up the causeway. The first time you visit is when the fear sets in, and as you see the rides get bigger and bigger as you drive across Lake Erie, and you truly realize what you're about to do. And the rides, everything was great, but nothing I've ever done can compare to Millennium Force and Steel Vengeance. Whether they are truly the world's most thrilling or not, Millie and Steve are hands down my two favorite attractions at any park, period. Easy. But there's never a dull moment. Gatekeeper, Raptor, Valraven, Maverick, Blue Streak, Magnum XL, Gemini, nowadays Top Thrill 2, and Siren's Curse, along with my guilty pleasure of Corkscrew, I have to ride it at least once every time I'm there. And that's not even a comprehensive list. The day we went was empty too, so we got to ride everything that was open. And to say the least, I've been a Gold Pass member ever since. In fact, the last time I went, I had the opportunity to stay on property at Sawmill Creek thanks to Amazing Nate. Now for today's introspective, I want to do things a little differently. Since discussing the park's history will take a long time, I will first talk about the park in its modern state, and then I will dive into the history of it. Okay, so Cedar Point is located on a peninsula in the city of Sandusky, Ohio, located in the Lake Erie Shores and Islands region. The main resort area contains Cedar Point Shores, Hotel Breakers, and the Cedar Point Marina, as well as Lighthouse Point, the Cedar Point Beach, and the Camper Village. Cedar Point also owns 3 off-site hotels: the Cedar Point Express Hotel, located 3/4 of a mile away, Castaway Bay, located 1 mile away, and Sawmill Creek, located 20 miles away. That's the one I've had the privilege of staying at. There is also the Cedar Point Sports Center, a sporting complex located about 15 miles away. The main park is 364 acres in size and contains 18 coasters and 3 water rides, with the grand total of attractions being a whopping 71. The 18 roller coasters which the park is most famous for are Blue Streak, Cedar Creek Mine Ride, Corkscrew, Gatekeeper, Gemini, Iron Dragon, Magnum XL 200, Maverick, Millennium Force, Pipe Scream, Raptor, Rougarou, Siren's Curse, Steel Vengeance, Top Thrill 2, Valraven, Wild Mouse, Wilderness Run, and the Woodstock Express. The park is also divided into different sections. The main midway, which contains Raptor, Blue Streak, Valraven, and the Sky Buckets, Kitty Kingdom and Planet Snoopy, which both contain various flat rides, the Boardwalk, which contains Gatekeeper, Wild Mouse, Max Air, and Windseeker. Then the park splits into 2 directions. To the left is the Millennium Midway, which contains Rougarou, Siren's Curse, Iron Dragon, and Millennium Force. To the right is CP Racing, which contains Top Thrill 2, Power Tower, and Corkscrew. Then, once you pass CP Racing, you hit the Gemini Midway, which contains Gemini, which is right next to Camp Snoopy, which contains the Woodstock Express. And both sides of the park, whether you go through the Millennium side or the Top Thrill 2 side, circle back to Frontier Town, which contains Maverick, Steel Vengeance, and the Cedar Creek Mine Ride. The park from front to back is 1 mile long. But that begs the question, where did this all start? Strap in, no pun intended, because we need to go all the way back to 1870. That year, Cedar Point opened as a public beach, and with no way to reach the peninsula by land, guests had to take a ferry over, the first ever one being called the Young Reindeer. The first wave of expansion came in the 1880s, which brought a dance hall, bathhouses, the lighthouse, the Grand Pavilion, which contained dining, bowling alleys, and a stage. And by the end of the decade, an electrical plant was built on the peninsula. Then, in 1892, Cedar Point opened its first ever roller coaster, the Switchback Railway. It was the tallest and fastest roller coaster in the world at the time, standing at 25 feet tall with a max speed of 10 miles an hour. The Switchback Railway would actually be involved with a lawsuit against the American Railway Coaster Company of Chicago. They were disputing with the Cedar Point Pleasure and Resort Company over profits. The turn of the century is when we see Cedar Point transform into a true resort, with the Bay Shore Hotel opening in 1899 and the White House opening in 1901, combined having over 75 rooms. In 1902, Cedar Point built its second roller coaster, the Figure 8 Roller Toboggan, along with a carousel and hotel electricity. The following year, Ohio State University built a lake observatory at Cedar Point. 1905 was a big year, as it saw the opening of the historic Hotel Breakers, which is still open today. At the time, it had the most rooms of any hotel anywhere, 600. Interestingly, in 1908, steamboat service to Cedar Point was opened from Toledo and even Detroit. The first roadway from Sandusky to Cedar Point, the Chaussee, was announced in 1911 and opened in 1914. The Chaussee is still operational today, but now serves as a residential area. The next few decades saw new attractions and expansions, but the next major event would be in 1957, when a group of Cleveland investors purchased Cedar Point and immediately followed it up by opening the Cedar Point Causeway, which is to this day the main way of accessing the park. Okay, so now we're starting to move into the modern era of the park. So what I'm going to do now is talk about the opening of each attraction, then go into depth on each attraction. So firstly, in 1964, the Blue Streak opened. Designed by the Philadelphia Toboggan Company, Blue Streak stands 78 feet tall and reaches speeds up to 40 miles an hour, giving a 90-second ride. In 2013, Amusement Today's Golden Ticket listed Blue Streak as the 27th best wooden roller coaster worldwide. And in 2022, ACE, the American Coaster Enthusiast, designated Blue Streak as a coaster landmark. In 1975, Cedar Point opened an IMAX theater, debuting with the film Man Belongs to the Earth. Today I will be covering two more major expansions in this video, and then I will leave it to part 2. But a year later, in 1976, Cedar Point would open Corkscrew. Designed by Aero Development, Corkscrew is made out of steel and features a height of 85 feet, a max speed of 48 miles an hour, and a 2-minute duration. Corkscrew is being credited as the second modern roller coaster to have a vertical loop, and the first ever roller coaster to have 3 inversions. The ride runs 3 24-passenger trains, one being red, one being blue, and one being white. Corkscrew has had a few incidents over the years. In 1981, 2 people were injured after a ride vehicle disengagement. And in 1999, the ride's chain lift snapped, leaving riders stranded. 4 riders were taken to first aid, but no injuries were sustained. And in 2005, the shoulder restraints unlocked mid-ride, and although no one was injured, the ride was closed and seatbelts were added. During the 2025 season, Corkscrew received an M&M sponsorship. Around this time, Cedar Point would take on a very ambitious mindset, which we will see being explored throughout the next 25 years, and that is to become the quote-unquote Disneyland of the Midwest. The first step in this direction came in 1977, as Cedar Point announced something big would come the following year. This ride would have a very troublesome construction, however. Starting with that summer, the Cedar Point Peninsula was struck by a tornado. The tornado destroyed buildings in Frontier Town along with many trees throughout the park. Then, the winter of early 1978 brought with it a severe blizzard, which would stall construction on this new coaster. But, despite it all, Cedar Point would open Gemini on June 17th, 1978. Gemini is a wood-and-steel hybrid racing coaster developed once again by Arrow, which on peak days operates both blue and red trains. At the time it was opened, Gemini was the world's tallest, steepest, and fastest roller coaster in the world. A set of phrases you'll hear a lot next episode as we dive into the coaster wars. Gemini reached a mass height of 125 feet, had a drop of 118 feet, and a high speed of 60 miles an hour. The ride's racing mechanic is natural, so neither car is a pre-decided winner. This is the point when Cedar Point would cement itself as a national icon, somewhere people would travel the country, sometimes even the world, to go to. Things only get crazier from here, so this seems like a good place to call it for part 1. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all in the next episode of LIAMS Random Introspectives. Oh, and one last thing, I apologize for my jacked up upload schedule. I'm just going to be completely honest, it'll probably stay this way for a couple months, but after marching season ends, I have some big things planned, so stay tuned.